All right. Welcome to Citizen Assembly Thunderdome, where we test ideas and hone debate skills in a real-life social political arena with a goal of holistic balance. If you'd like to participate, find out how in our podcast description. Let's start with a round of introductions for our panel. We've got about 30 seconds apiece to tell our listeners what's on your mind in the moment. I'll start. I'm Staci Gustafson. My major focus is holistic community problem solving, and what's on my mind in the moment is how so many people are searching for and trying to create fair, supportive, heart-based community, and I am very encouraged about that. Next, we have Cezary Jurewicz, the creator of Egora. Please tell us what's on your mind in the moment, Cezary.
Oh, hi. Thank you for having me here. It's always such a blast, but I'm just so stressed. So much stuff going on. Just creating new things and running into roadblocks. So I don't know what else to say.
Thank you very much. So glad to have you here. I understand the all the stuff going on in roadblocks. I hear you. Ramses, what is going on with you in this moment?
Hey guys, so I'm very happy because today I have got my EFR 32XG22, and this will actually help me do some testing for work. And I'm just thinking about a design for a driver for NVM3 because my manager just wants me to do it. Here's what I have in my mind right now.
Ramses, could you repeat that for people who don't know what you're talking about?
The rule is to do that in 30 seconds, not 30 minutes. So, but anyways, it is just stuff about electronics and programming that I'm excited about. And I got my chip today from digikey.ca.
Ramses was showing us a computer part, and it's Greek to me, but she's explained it is a chip and it looks very impressive. Thank you, Ramses. Thank you for being here today. And Joy, would you like to share with us what you're thinking about in this moment real briefly?
How to accomplish all the things I need to accomplish in a minimum amount of time. Learn to trust people. I'm the type of person that sits back and watches. And when you prove to me you're trustworthy, I let you into my life. I've been that way all my life. So right now I am trying to focus on people to trust and get things done.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I hear where you're coming from, Joy. Thanks for being here today. And Cynthia, what is going on for you in this moment?
Well, there's so many things going on with me, but the thing that is actually coming to mind is how grateful I am to be a spark that is shot off the bonfire that is Cezary. I am just so grateful. So love.
Thank
Cynthia,
you.
could you repeat that for people who don't know what you're talking about?
Okay.
Well, if not for Cezary, who is the creator of Egora-ilp.org, I would not have the opportunity to have Citizens Assembly Women. I wouldn't have the opportunity to do the Thunderdome with you beautiful humans. I wouldn't be able to do a lot of things, and I'm just very grateful to be able to stand in the shadow of his bonfire.
Beautifully said. Thank you very much. Thank you, panel. And let's move on to today's presentation. Today, I'm presenting my idea on toxic femininity, which has been written up to share with others in Egora, the worldwide stock market of ideas at egora-ilp.org. Egora is an online platform where people from around the world can turn their ideas into policy to build a better world. I'll start screen sharing my idea from the Egora profile. All right. premise. The media would seem to support a meme that the masculine portion of humanity is toxic, while the feminine portion of humanity has no such parallel. I believe this is out of holistic balance, and I offer this narrative and solution in order to return holistic balance to this apparent issue. I define gender toxicity as gender-specific strategies, coping mechanisms, and tendencies that diminish others. While I believe broad generalizations cannot adequately address any issue, I offer some for brevity. This is a personal example of what I perceive to be common maladaptive strategies and coping mechanisms used by people on the feminine spectrum. I want to make it crystal clear at the outset here that my mother, the subject of this idea, has only the highest intent and wants only the most loving and positive outcomes for everyone around her. Also, that I understand I clearly have unresolved issues surrounding this subject. It is our maladaptive cultural ideas that I wish to focus on in this example and solution. I offer here 3 areas of evidence for feminine toxicity. Statement number 1, statements that reveal the opinion that others are less than, unfixable, bad, wrong, etc., what many call gossip. 2, giving of oneself to an unhealthy level, not accepting things in return and expecting the same of others. 3, getting needs met through mental, emotional, and social manipulation. Toxic masculine versus toxic feminine. I believe any general lack of ability, if valid, to see the feminine version of gender toxicity is tied to the passive receptive feminine nature versus the active masculine. An unbalanced man who has been taught by society to value success above all, and that success means winning, will push out of the way anyone barring their path to success. Overcoming one's contenders in a man's world, such as business or sports, is a highly visible event. An unbalanced woman, on the other hand, being naturally more passive receptive than active, and being taught by society that the woman who wins love is invisible and self-sacrificing above all, is not allowed such visible means of achieving anything in their life. I therefore wish to make better understood the feminine side of the gender toxicity coin for the sake of balance. The basis for this idea. I distinctly remember deciding as a preschool child to emulate my father rather than my mother. From my observations, my mother was a victim of her emotions. She laid in bed and cried regularly. My father, on the other hand, appeared to be the driving force in our lives. He was the businessman who needed extra care at home because he worked until exhaustion, morning until night, as a car salesman. He was also the champion of my mother's craft ideas. He was the person that opened doors to large corporations and dealt with the opposing forces of lawyers, financiers, and company leaders. My mother complained vociferously about those men and men in general and blamed men for virtually everything she disliked. Based on this, I concluded she felt unable to deal with men successfully. My mother also often stated that she never wanted to receive the accolades of fame or success. She was happy to stay in the background. My father taught me I needed to be tough because it was a man's world and everyone was out to get me. My mother taught me to have the ability to earn money so I'd never have to depend upon a man. Okay. All right, we had some technical difficulties, but we are back online, and I will find my spot again. Sorry for the delay here, folks. Did I talk about the TV and movies?
I think that's where you were about to go. I also watched.
Exactly. I also watched, yeah.
Okay. So the ending of the last paragraph, just to catch us up, my mother taught me to have the ability to earn money so I'd never have to depend upon a man. I also watched plenty of TV and movies which portrayed women as out of control emotionally, often needing a man to slap them into rationality so they could accept direction and join the man in rising above the fray to victory and a happy ride off into the sunset. In light of all these feminine tendencies to stay quiet and in the background, I failed to see many of the things my mother did that contributed to the success of her crafts, and they were highly successful. You may actually find her 70s craft products to this day in garage sales. I also decided that not just my mother, but all women were weak and ineffective, especially around men. So I determined to figure out what it was about men that made them so different, powerful, and capable compared to women. My investigation found there is no such determining factor. Men are not in possession of some special sauce that women don't have. It has only recently come to my attention that these things my mother desires me to copy are actually very toxic or diminishing to others I interact with. While steeped in good intent, these beliefs women hold about themselves being pillars of virtue if they conform to society's ideals of a good woman are extremely maladaptive and even harmful to those around us. I now see that while she, and I in turn, does not actively ask for what she needs or wants, she is fulfilling this through manipulative strategies. One is the making of statements that identify the subject as broken or bad. For example, someday you'll understand, and then you can fill in any statement of goodness that she has that I don't. These statements sound encouraging, but they are actually saying, I have this and you don't. An assumption that shows she is viewing me or others as lacking some essential ingredient. Most of her conversation revolves around how bad other people are, even loved family members. This instills in the listener that in order to gain the approval of the mother, one must avoid any of the behaviors she is berating in others, and that does not leave a large selection of behaviors that are acceptable to exhibit. In addition, disagreement with her worldview brings a huge angry reaction that can go on for hours unless I agree with her view or agree to seek counseling. While a personal experience, I believe this is a powerful illustration of toxic femininity. I or others need professional help. In other words, we need to be repaired unless one adopts the feminine worldview. The result is a perfect heaven in which only one person exists, and every other person, other than Martha Stewart, must fix themselves to be worthy of a place beside her. I do not mean to say that women are the only ones who manipulate people by making them feel bad, but I do feel that the ideals that society and women have adopted as good need to be exposed and questioned. As a wise woman recently said, life is a cycle where both life and death, giving and taking, must exist in harmony. To only give and nurture and to have the appearance of receiving nothing in return results in maladaptive and manipulative strategies and tendencies in an attempt to re-achieve the balance that every body needs. The solution: I recommend a comprehensive educational platform designed for varying ages, such as early education and adult education, that teaches balanced masculine/feminine interactions and changes our society's view of success to that of being a happy and healthy family.
Very well written, Staci. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So unless you guys have some comments immediately, I kind of wanted to ask each person if they feel comfortable speaking about this. I don't know, I've gotten some negative feedback already. I think maybe it's a bit of a sacred cow, which is kind of funny because cows are a symbol of femininity and motherhood and mother. So I was just wondering if anybody would like to share how they feel about speaking on this. Cynthia.
I freaking love this idea. And there's a lot there. Like I know I didn't catch it all, but I got the essence of what you were saying, and you're absolutely correct. If I had any commentary on it, it would just be that you didn't go into the complete cycle of how it perpetuates itself generation after generation after generation. But that's me. I'm a philosophy person. I like those rabbit holes. But I freaking love this. Like, this falls right in line with feminine ethics, which is less about dividing us and taking us to one extreme or the other, but bringing us all to the middle so that we can, behave and work together as equals. So, yay.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Boy, I really did not expect that reaction from Cynthia. So yay. Thank you very much. Ramses, you had your hand up?
Yeah, it's really well written, and thank you so much for sharing your mother's experience. I really feel her. I would say kudos to you for writing up this idea. Kudos, or in Egyptian we say shabu. However, I disagree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, just for clarity.
Okay. Cezary, how do you feel about discussing this, if you wouldn't mind answering?
Oh, I'd be happy to discuss it. There's some interesting information and perspective in here. But I feel like I'm actually looking at it, trying to reread some of the details to put it all together. Because when I think of feminine toxicity, I think of something a little bit different. So I don't know. I'm trying to catch up. Give me a moment here.
Okay, very good. All right, Joy, did you want to share how you might feel about talking about this subject? Okay, we're not getting anything from Joy. Kevin, would you like to share at all how you feel about speaking about this?
Yeah, I like some of the idea. There's a lot there. There's several layers, definitely for me. I feel more ill-equipped just based on my understanding of what the definition of, or what people's different perception of feminine toxicity. So for me, I'm just, not really, I'm not really skilled enough in it yet myself to be able to give it as much detail as it needs right now. But certainly I like it's, there's enough there to revisit the discussion for sure. I'd also like to read it.
Very good. Thank you very much, Kevin. So, Cynthia, go ahead.
And that was kind of the same commentary I had that Kevin just made, but just for clarity, what you are essentially defining as feminine toxicity is the judgment and generational damage that we pass on from one to the other and to those around us. Is that correct?
Well, let me give my definition again. Sorry for the gap in sound here.
And no worries, you're not going to find one specific place. That's what I just got. That's what I got from the entirety of it, is what it sounded like to me. And I'm asking you if that was your intention.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I did right here. I defined gender toxicity as gender-specific strategies, coping mechanisms, and tendencies that diminish others. And I offer 3 areas of evidence of feminine toxicity, which are statements that reveal the opinion that others are less than, unfixable, bad, or wrong, and this is often considered gossip. 2, giving of oneself to an unhealthy level, not accepting things in return and expecting the same of others. And 3, getting needs met through mental, emotional, and social manipulation.
Oh, yes, I love this idea. It's so psychologically based. Sorry.
Does anybody want to jump in and Ramses, would you like? Yes, Ramses, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So my first comment, sorry. My first comment is actually what you are describing, Staci, in my opinion, is not toxic femininity, but it's more like gender phobia. Especially the statements in the second last paragraph, in which you say that we inherit this kind of statements, from generation to generation. Actually, in my opinion, this gender phobia mixed with hate against men. I understand that a lot of women, in their lives had problems with men. I remember when I was living in Ottawa, I stayed for 1 year and a half with a family, and the landlord, I used to call her mother, and her boyfriend was my father, And at some night, I was sleeping, and then I woke up on the police alarm, the police car sirens. I went down to find out that the landlord, which is my mother, has actually had a fight with her boyfriend, and she turned off his clothes, and she threw stuff on him, and oh my goodness, it was terrible. So I in my opinion, this is not toxic femininity or toxic masculinity or anything. It is just problems that happens between all people who are married. And because most people who are married are actually males and female couples, so usually, statistically, you will find that females usually hate males from their experience. And in my opinion, these problems can be solved if we actually put our finger on the right problem. Toxic femininity as a term will not help us achieve that, in my opinion. And toxic masculinity is even worse, because this term is actually, again, is also coined by women who just hate men for whoever they are.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting. And I agree, both terms, toxic masculinity, toxic femininity, we don't need them. They don't help. I thought that it was important to bring up because of the balance, that there doesn't seem to be any media help to balance this out. So, Cezary, you have your hand up?
So I want to start by saying I'm still looking at the idea to think of what else I can say about it as you framed it. But I'm thinking about toxic femininity, and the way I would think of it. It would be like women using their bodies and their sexuality as like a way to gain for material advancement, like, and just go into excess with that, and basing all of their relationships with men and other people based on this type of exchange, like, and seeing people then only as instruments who are able to fuel their who people who feed their ego and also feed their wallets, because it's like, hey, I'm hot, give me money, and if you can't give me money, then, or whatever, if you can't give me attention, well, then I don't care about you, you're nobody. Like, that's what I think of as toxic femininity, because I look at that as being toxic to like the social fabric. Because it's a culture of disrespect. In a sense, it's based on power. Women have this form of power, that they're, they have certain assets, and unless you're able to make that exchange, you have money or whatever, or attention or something. Well, then you don't matter. Then it's, then you can't have communication with that person. That's just not good for society, for community building. That's what I think of. Anyways, I don't know what else to say, so I'm going to stop here for now.
Yeah. I know that, or I imagined when I wrote that up that I was only touching on a very little portion, and I don't know about all the other ways that people would say toxic femininity. And I do agree that is something that I would understand to be toxic femininity if we have to use that term. And what do you think the solution is there?
I just want to say real quick, just want to add on. I think what's interesting is that's kind of the opposite of what you're saying. And maybe the imbalance, because you could take it to extreme either way. Like, give me what you got because I'm hot, or like, oh no, I don't want anything. I can only give to you. You know, you don't have to give me anything. So maybe it's kind of going both ways. You know, it's maybe both of those things. Are both of those extremes toxic? I mean, they might not be good in both ways. I don't know. What do we think of as toxic? Toxic is such an interesting word. So maybe we should spend some time identifying toxicity in general.
And maybe could somebody point out what would be a toxic masculine trait that we could compare them?
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that, and then from there we can actually, you know, so just one thing I think, that I disagree with Cezary. Sorry about that, but you disagreed with me last time, so I have the right to disagree with you this time. I think we are mixing between what you are describing, Staci, as toxic femininity and prostitution. Okay, so prostitution is exactly what Cezary is describing. So for instance, I love computers. So this is one of my traits, my good traits, and I use them to get money, right? Some woman, for genetic reasons and because she takes care of some aspects in her life, it came out to be hot, you know? So she is using same traits in order to get money. So in my opinion, it's just a job, and not all women do that. And I would expect actually very few percentage of females in our society would actually seek men for money on the basis that they think they are hot. And this kind of narcissistic, in my opinion. The first statement you said, Cezary, it's, in my opinion, is kind of close to what toxic femininity should be like. You mentioned that when you think about toxic femininity, you think about the female traits exported to the society and represented in a very specific way. And this is toxic in a sense that we can discuss later. So first of all, my understanding of toxic masculinity is that from my experience, for example, when I have a lot of friends, you know, who are gym gurus, and when they post their photos, you know, I'm just like, oh my goodness, you really do hard work. However, I know some females who actually feel jealous about this, feel jealous as jealousy, you know, and they get negative feelings when they see the expression of masculinity, either on social media or in public or whatever. And I think there are psychological aspects that need to be considered here. It is not masculinity that is toxic. It is actually the people who are getting, you know, the poison from inside themselves because they have psychological problems. And then when it comes to toxic femininity, so it can be a parallel, in my opinion. I have read an article online about a man who is saying that he always felt jealous about women when they express their femininity. So when, for instance, he sees a woman, you know, a sexy woman who is just dressed very well, or photos online on Facebook or whatever, he feels jealous because he has an internal problem with himself. He believes that he is unable to reach out to women. You know, he's lacking self-confidence in some way, and that makes him feel jealous. And then this reaction, you know, becomes more apparent when he reacts to femininity being expressed. So they would actually try to suppress the expression of femininity in order to please themselves. under the name of toxic femininity. That's my opinion. I might be wrong.
Ramses, real quick, I just want to say, I don't get what you're saying by jealous. Jealous of who exactly?
Jealous of the other gender? I'm sorry, this is very psychologically complicated, I know. Actually, I had to read, multiple articles on this specific point in order to understand it. So, when you want to buy something, let's say, for instance, a BMW, okay, but you don't have the money to buy it. And then this need becomes obsessive. You really always think about getting a BMW, but as time goes, it sounds like you always fail to collect the amount of money that can help you get this BMW. So by the time actually you develop hate, especially when you are rejected many times, so you develop jealousy because you know that you will not, or you will never, or you have a false belief inside you that you will never get it. You will never get this hot woman because you have been rejected multiple times, and this affected your psychology. And in my opinion, of course, all people get rejections, whoever they are, like on all levels. And we all are sensitive, and because we are social creatures at the end of the day. But some people are just very sensitive in a way that makes them more vulnerable to such psychological problems, in my opinion.
Cezary, did you want to comment on that? Or I have something as well. I can't see. Okay. Okay, so Ramses, I understand the idea that there could be a dislike for the other sex by somebody who has it thrown in their face and yet can't possess it. But I think, what about when you bring up the idea of the muscles? So there's a woman who sees a man displaying muscles, and she's not jealous because she can't possess it so much. But how about the idea that this is a display of aggression and ability to overpower and a safety issue? Do you see that as being, go ahead.
Yeah, this is still a psychological problem, in my opinion. If your mind correlates between muscles and aggression, then you definitely have a problem. Probably, maybe you have been having trauma. You have been beaten up by a man before. When you were a child, your father was always offensive to your mother. This kind of stuff. So in my opinion, it's really a problem. It's really a psychological problem. If your mind is programmed to give you these negative impressions when you see muscles, because most muscles are to protect us, like these strengths that, and having masculine members of society, this is actually to protect us. It is not against you as a woman. It is to protect you and protect the tribe. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, but what about the fact that crimes and violent crimes are mostly committed by men, and very, very often domestic abuse? So is there not some real basis for feeling unsafe around men who clearly have an extra amount of testosterone, which is the chemical that can bring about violence and aggression?
So statistically speaking, yes, there might be a higher number of men who get engaged in such violence. However, out of all men, how many men beat up their woman, or get engaged in domestic violence with their woman?
I have an answer for that, but I'm going to let Cezary comment.
Well, when we're talking about toxicity, I think that we have to define toxicity and toxic to what exactly, like what is the thing that's being affected by the toxicity of something? So,
Well, I'm going by to answer you if you're asking me. I'm going by this is something that is very much in the news, and it's actually been spoken of since 1995. I just saw a sitcom that talked about that from 1995. This discussion has been going on. So it seems like there's a lot of discussion around what toxic masculinity is, and yet we're kind of having a little difficulty defining it. Cezary, did you want to comment on that?
well, I mean, I could give I suppose, a few examples. I mean, largely that has to do, I think, to our, you could say, social fabric, the ability for people to communicate without feeling diminished or threatened or excluded, marginalized. And I mean, of course, that's like politically and socially, I'm thinking of what else it can do. Toxicity. Yeah, I almost wish I had been taking notes of what I've been saying. I should have written that down before I said that.
I like those examples. I think that's true. Ramses, I wanted to come back to, you said, is how many people have really been abused by men, and is that really a basis for fear if they haven't been themselves abused by men? And I would give an example.
That was not the question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So my question is, how many out of all men, how many men get engaged in domestic violence? Okay. So you were saying that there might be a basis for women to correlate masculinity or muscles with abuse or with negative use of strengths, because they have been abused by men. So the logical question here is, how many men, and you also mentioned that men are, statistically speaking, more men than women get engaged in domestic violence. So my question here is, even if there are a lot of men who get engaged in domestic violence, what is their percentage out of all men? So you will find out that the percentage is pretty small to an extent that doesn't allow us to make an induction like this over all men. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I feel that there's a difference between, I heard you say, what about those women who haven't been attacked or had violence or whatever by a man, and there aren't that many men. But in the case of my mother, who developed her beliefs, she had two sisters, one beaten to death who came back from death, one sister who was beaten up so horribly that it was the worst that the hospital had seen, and it was very common to see beaten women. And this was just a very common thing. She herself was not beaten up, but to see that happen with multiple women in her family, I think is extreme evidence that women are unsafe around men, at least in that community at that time. Go ahead, Ramses. Or I'm sorry, Cezary, you had your hand up, and then Ramses.
So I'm thinking of other ways in which something can be toxic. And another way that we could look at toxicity is, you could say, almost like a perversion of virtues. Maybe like the virtue of a man is to be strong, right? Like that's the virtue of a man, like physically strong. Or fast, maybe something like that. And so, and it's a virtue in that it's actually used for like social good, but of course it could also be used for social bad. It could be dominating, like so I think that's a type of masculine toxicity. And I'm thinking of another virtue, I guess a virtue of a man is being more level-headed. I mean, I don't want to, or more rational. I mean, some people might say that. I don't know. I don't know if I would really say that
be
myself.
overly rational and not take into account the heart, which is also there. I think there's over rationality, yes.
But so I'm thinking, like, if that is a masculine virtue, then I'm thinking of how that virtue can be perverted and how that could be toxic masculinity. I'm actually having a hard time thinking.
I got an example of that.
Yeah.
How about in the case of a child or any person has stolen something, and the law is some punishment, and so the rational mind will say, well, I'm sorry, that is just the law, and it doesn't take into account the certain circumstances that are happening in this situation, and I'm very, very sorry, but here's the punishment. And I think that is a perversion of that rationality.
I think that's a great example. But then again, is that really rational though? It seems like it's not rational, but I could see how that's like a perversion of rationality. Maybe we could call that, I don't know, should we call that something like that, toxic masculinity?
Toxic rationality, whoever exhibits it.
Although it's not really rational though, like it's not rational to not take the circumstances into consideration.
Okay, then
Exactly.
It's not wrong to murder people that you're able to murder either. I think it works.
I think this shows you that there is no toxic rationality, there is no toxic masculinity, and there is no toxic femininity. Simple.
In what way did you show that?
Sure, like you can't even find how that so we came up with multiple possible descriptions for this toxic femininity, right? However, until now we cannot find how this can be toxic. What kind of, so expressing femininity in how can this be toxic to society? How can this harm society? It only harms people who have problems with it. And I think these people actually need psychotherapy, in fact. And we all need psychotherapy, like all of us have their own trauma and problems and psychological problems. So anyways, would you like me to answer your, because you mentioned your mother's experience and your family, and I just wanted to say that of course it's horrible to hear that, and I'm very sorry about it. However, we still need to understand that, first of all, it is not common. You said it is common, and in my opinion, no, it is not common. It's not common to hear about a woman being killed or being beaten to death by her husband. And such kind of people actually here's a problem is with the husband himself, not masculinity. And even if we go to prison, okay, if we take a tower in a prison, for example, you will find out that the men, the population of males in a male prison simply represents the society. There are masculine men, there are men who are not that masculine, there are gay men out there, there are bisexual men, and most of them actually just do one crime in their life and they go out, and women themselves do domestic violence, and I have seen it myself. However, I was not traumatized by it because I'm just 27. And by that time I was 26. So, I'm old enough. But of course, young people would be vulnerable to such traumas.
Cezary, I'm going to jump in and then turn it over to you. I'm very surprised, Ramses, that you're saying that violence against women by men is very uncommon. We had a women's meeting that actually talked about the statistics of domestic violence, and it was shocking. The numbers are shocking. It is very prevalent, very prevalent. Go ahead, Cezary.
So sorry, Cezary, just to clarify, I'm not saying that violence or domestic violence by men is not common. I'm saying it is uncommon to hear about a woman who has been beaten up to death by her husband.
And I think we're not just talking about beating to death or being in those terrible situations. Any violence is too much, and I don't think we're talking about just to death. Go ahead, Cezary.
So I came to the conclusion, I don't think it's possible to pervert rationality. Rationality is always great. The more, the better. There is no limit of that virtue. No limit to that. However, maybe the thing that we were talking about is more like decisiveness, or it could almost be like stubbornness. Maybe that is, I don't know. Is it a manly virtue as opposed to a womanly virtue to be more decisive? Once that you actually make a decision, you stick with it. And so maybe that would exemplify that situation where somebody might be quick to judge or just apply the standard without trying to make a decision before having all the facts. Maybe that could be like that can be a perversion of that. But I was just thinking of another example of maybe toxic masculinity, because if it's a masculine trait to work a lot and to produce, then maybe being like a workaholic, just actually spending too much time at work for a man instead of at home with his family. Maybe that's a type of toxic masculinity,
Okay, so that makes me think that if we're talking about this in the way that we think we've seen it and we're trying to work it out, it would almost seem that we're talking about imbalance. Imbalanced feminine, imbalanced masculine. Cynthia, do you have a comment about that?
I just wanted to mention that the cardinal virtues are in fact justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude. And I would say that we should all be practicing those all the time, and we would live in a much better world. That's all I wanted to add.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Cynthia, can you break that down into masculine and feminine virtues? Is there such a thing? Can you think of something like that?
I would say there is not.
Ramses,
that is where I stand. I believe it is these imbalances that make us believe that there is a difference, but I don't believe that there is. I believe that we all have the capacity to exercise and practice the cardinal virtues, and thereby leading to other virtuous behaviors. But that's just my personal experience / opinion. So, out.
Thank you very much. Ramses, you had your hand up.
So just relating to what Cezary is trying to do, which is finding maybe a proper definition for toxic masculinity and femininity. I would like to draw a very interesting example. There are many people out there, especially the communists and leftists, especially here in Montreal, who hate the cops. Okay, they hate police. And I guess this hate also has some psychological factors. The most important factor is actually we as humans tend to have fear from any other animal who is stronger than us or who has the power, And because there are many cases out there for police violence, then we tend to generalize, these, especially, for example, after George Floyd, well, it was my second day in Montreal, June 2020, and many people here were protesting against police and using signs like stop police violence, stop white privilege, stop, we don't need police. I don't believe in police, and this kind of signs. However, there is a very big positive rule for police, which is protecting us. And I myself had a lot of positive experience with Ottawa police, who really helped me many times. Especially one time, I'm sorry to say that, but really one time I was trying to commit suicide and someone has called police and they really did a great job. And I would say that, of course, personal experience is different from one person to the other, but most people who deal with police are actually criminals, right? So you have to take this in account. And it came out that George Floyd himself actually did criminal behavior. And I think, you have seen the video, guys. And other than that, I understand that there is a big ratio of violence, or a big possibility that a policeman might be violent, However, it is not really statistically significant to say that all police are violent. And if you have psychological problems when you see a policeman in the street, then you should also seek a psychotherapist so that you know that this police guy is protecting you, it's not against you.
Thank you. Cynthia, go ahead.
Although you are absolutely correct, most police officers are actually there to serve a good purpose. They do not insist on people that they know are exhibiting antisocial, just very poor behavior for a police officer, because they're all brothers now, and that sort of complicity leads me to conclude that they are no less guilty.
Go ahead, Ramses.
Actually, I don't think so at all. In fact, so they are humans, okay? We know that police officers are humans. So they will tend to act just like a human. When you know that one of your colleagues at work is convicted, of sexual harassment, are you gonna unionize with him? In fact, most people will actually try to limit their interaction with that person, because they know he's a trouble person and he's gonna get fired very soon. So it's better, to stay away from that person. And this is actually what happened with the officer who has beaten George Floyd up to death. Do you think that this officer has got support from his friends? Absolutely no. What happened actually is that most people who are close to that person try to deny, their close friendship with him. And of course, no, we don't praise this action, and we want to save our jobs because we are humans and we are just doing this for our family and our children. And so, in my opinion, it is not union. It is not. They are not a gang, forming a union with each other. And same with masculines. Like masculine males are not a gang for making a union with each other. Actually, most men disagree with domestic violence, and many men support feminism. However, it is actually bureaucracy, in my opinion. There's a lot of bureaucracy in the States compared to Canada.
Well, I'm sorry, Staci, go ahead.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
I would say at least part, if not a large part of the problem are the police unions, because they will fight against the firing of any police officer. And I will also say in respect to George Floyd, that officer had prior incidents where he had pretty much shown himself to be exactly the person he was on that video, and there was nothing done about him. And even though his brothers may not have wanted to hang out with him, he was still allowed to carry a gun. he was still allowed to enforce himself on another person, despite the fact that every one of them knew that he should not be able to do that. And that's the problem that I'm talking about.
Wow. Okay. Right when things are really sparking up here, it's time to wrap up. Ramses, do you have a very brief statement in response to that? And then we can move to closing remarks.
Yep, sure. It is not the onions that enabled that guy in his job for 10 years, for the last 10 years that he had done these stupid things. In my opinion, it is not the onion. It is actually, in my opinion, you guys as the states, you have very complicated system. Okay, and these kind of outliers in the system show you how you do not have an efficient system to actually evaluate officers in the right way. And this doesn't only apply to officers, this applies to teachers, to judges, and even to the presidents themselves. And we hear a lot here in Canada. And in my opinion, this is a system problem. It's not a people problem. There's no one, like most police officers, and you know that you have a police officer in your family, and you have a judge in your family, you have an engineer in your family, and most of them will disagree with what happened with George Floyd.
Thank you very much. All right, let's move to closing remarks now. And then after that, we will measure support for the idea. So Cezary, would you like to start us off with closing remarks, please?
Well, we did end up talking about a lot of different things. This idea of toxic femininity it's interesting to me because I like how it kind of brings balance to the idea of toxic masculinity. I think we would have to spend a bit more time identifying what it is that we are actually concerned with. If something is toxic, then what are we actually protecting from the corrosive nature of that toxicity? Yeah, and I don't know what else to say. It's an interesting conversation. Perhaps it would be good to have even more time to discuss it. But yeah, for right now, that's all I got about that. And come join us in Citizen Assembly. You'll find the information in Egora, egora-ilp.org. Thank you for hosting this session, Staci.
Thank you very much, Cezary. Cynthia, do you have some closing remarks for us?
Yes, I feel compelled to follow that up with, that's agora-ilp.org, Citizens Assembly. I am very, very grateful for this conversation. Ooh, I almost got into like a whole debate and everything. Like, oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Ramses. I'm not always grateful to debate, but I do enjoy spirited conversations. So thank you so much. Thank you, Staci, for having this. Thank you, Cezary, for being for delivering the baby that we call Egora. And that's all I have to say, except I am very grateful and I love you all.
Thank you very much. Ramses, do you have some closing remarks for us?
Yeah, I would say toxic femininity doesn't bring balance. It actually makes things worse. And I think the problem is actually to seek psychotherapists. We need to understand our psychology much better. And one last thing here is monogamy, again, is not natural. A man living with a woman in the same room for a very, very long time, of course, they will have to clash at some point of time. And even me, like I can't stand it. Like one night and then, that's very enough for me. So that's why you don't see such domestic violence among gays. Also, gay couples are male and male, right? And usually, like in most cases, one male is the masculine party and the other is the feminine party, right? So in that case, if one tops the other, why don't him beat the other guy when they clash, right? So in my opinion, that's because most gay relationships have smaller duration, shorter duration, than than straight relationships. Straight couples tend to live together for many, many years, but gay couples tend to live together, for a shorter amount of time. And many LGBT people are actually polyamorous, as we discussed before. And in my opinion, open relationships are the way to go. Your man doesn't need to stay with you forever. Be yourself as a woman. You are a strong woman. You just need to be independent. That's my opinion. And finally, thank you so much, Staci, for organizing the whole thing and for working on tech side, and also for writing up for the very good write-up for the idea. It was really awesome to be your guest, Staci, today. And it was very awesome to talk to you guys.
Thank you so much. I always love your viewpoints. You always bring so much to the meeting. And I hope that we get to continue this discussion afterwards here. Kevin, do you have any closing remarks for us?
Yeah, I opens a huge can of worms for me, to be honest, because I want to fix the concept of the toxic component, and how do you fix it? How do you avoid that? So bringing it back to a little bit of the point that you made and was about school and education, right? So the one thing that comes to my mind is, okay, so where is it coming from and how do we stop it? And at what age group, right? And is it really not just nonviolent communication, teaching nonviolent communication and radical inclusivity in school? And then I ask, at what age do we teach that? And do we teach it preschool? Because while you're teaching it, the brain is developing. I think this opened just a large can of worms for me. But I really appreciate all the effort writing it out. I unfortunately had a very bad time with sound on my end tonight. Almost everyone was digitized for me because for some reason I live in Canada, and that's I get worse coverage than Ramses does in Montreal. But in any event, this is really great. I really enjoyed my time here, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. I hope you do join us again. Thanks a lot. Joy, did you want to make any closing remarks? You're muted.
Okay. I enjoy listening to it all, learning what others think. As I stated in the beginning, I'm a different type of person. I grew up respecting men and women for their roles in my life. I had a very strict father, U.S. Marine Corps Sergeant Major. So we were taught respect. And I have raised my children that way, whether you're female or not, female, male, whatever, you need to respect one another for themselves and their personality, their belief. I have seen over my years that women play on their femininity to manipulate men. If that's kind of what you're saying in female toxicity, I've seen it. In fact, one situation that came to mind during this discussion is a little great granddaughter I have. Extremely beautiful, extremely talented. 5 years old, came and asked me for money After we had left a hardware store, she wanted a candy. I gave her the money, sent her back in to pay for her candy, and some older gentleman behind her paid for her candy because she was cute. I'm like, no, this 5-year-old cannot, don't teach a 5-year-old that she can play on her beauty and get what she wants. I don't care what it is. And I think that message needs to be taught to all children to grow up and avoid maybe your feminine toxicity, if that makes any sense.
It absolutely does. Yes.
So be yourself, learn to pay your own way, basically, and don't manipulate men or other females, adults, whoever. And I think that in that way you learn to respect yourself as well as others. That's it.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'm going to segue into my closing remarks with that and say, definitely, I believe we should each respect each other's strengths and differences, and as well as our own strengths and differences. So if women are perhaps taught that their strengths are not valuable, then the whole thing will be, everybody will be more balanced if we all just understand good and bad. We each have good and bad, and we just need to balance it more. All of these discussions seem to come back to creating better people by teaching balance in early life. And I very much appreciate, Ramses, your comments about counseling. Absolutely, I believe everybody can benefit from that, because we've been teaching each other the best that we know how, but maybe it isn't always the best for us. So yeah, let's all learn a little bit more about respecting each other, appreciating each other, and keeping it more towards the center and not the extremes and not the imbalances. So thank you all so much for joining in this conversation with me. I was a little bit worried. It's a tough conversation, and you guys really dug into it. There's a lot more to it too, and I hope that we can continue a little bit. I'm going to, I still have to check the, do you guys agree with the idea and or support it in Egora? And if you can raise hands for agreement and keep up for a minute, I can call them out. Does anybody agree with this idea?
I don't know how to agree.
Raise your hand. Okay. So we've got an by Cynthia. We've got Cezary with a hand up, Joy with a hand up, and I don't see Kevin's image, so I'm not sure. All right. Is there anybody who is going to support this in Egora? No hands on that one. Okay, we have a few agreements, and I'll have to work on the support for Egora in the future. Again, guys, thanks so much. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we can open the floor for discussion again.